The evening marked a big moment for Emma and James Turner. 20 years of marriage, celebrated in their elegant home. The place was filled with friends, family, and a sense of admiration for the couple everyone thought they knew well. Laughter and shared memories flowed with the champagne as guests reminisced about Emma and James's life together, their vacations, their successes, the life they'd built. Emma moved through the crowd gracefully, her smile steady but her mind elsewhere. Inside, she carried a truth that was impossible to ignore. Tonight, she had decided, was the night she'd lay it all out. No more secrets. James stood close to her, playing his part as the devoted husband. His charm was as polished as ever, and to everyone around, he seemed like the perfect spouse. But Emma knew what others didn't. The celebration was just to cover a chance for her to share the truth about James's double life, a truth that would soon turn this happy anniversary upside down. Emma had known for weeks. The truth had come to her in fragments: a strange phone call, a receipt that didn't add up, the subtle changes in James's schedule. She pieced it together carefully, knowing it would shatter the life they'd built. Tonight, surrounded by friends and family, she planned to reveal everything. As the evening carried on, Emma's calm exterior hid her steady resolve. With each passing toast and laugh, her decision grew firmer. She'd set up a live stream meant to connect with family members who couldn't make it to the party. But tonight, it had another purpose. Emma had arranged for everyone in James's life to see what she was about to share. Quietly, she signaled to the technician, a small nod that set her plan into motion. Emma tapped her champagne glass, signaling that she had a few words to share. The room fell silent as guests turned toward her, expecting a simple toast, a few sweet words about love and time. But what they were about to hear would leave them speechless. Emma began her speech with warmth, speaking of the years she and James had shared. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge that kept everyone listening a little closer. She talked about the memories they'd built together, but then her tone shifted. Sometimes, she said, you think you know someone. You think you know the life you share. James, standing beside her, began to sense that something was off, but he held his smile, perhaps thinking it was just nerves. Then Emma paused, locking eyes with James before turning back to their guests. There's someone very special who's watching tonight, she continued. Someone who's been part of James's life, just like I have. Her name is Vanessa. She didn't look away as she let the words settle over the room. A quiet shock fell among the guests. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as people exchanged glances, trying to make sense of what they were hearing. Emma kept her composure, waiting for the truth to hit its mark, while James's confident smile had all but faded. The room erupted into a mix of disbelief and confusion. Guests looked at one another, stunned, trying to grasp the bombshell Emma had just dropped. Forks clattered against plates, whispers turned into gasps, and heads turned toward James, who now stood frozen, his face drained of all charm and confidence. Emma's father tightened his grip on his champagne glass, his eyes locked on James with a growing anger. Friends and family exchanged uneasy glances, realizing the man they thought they knew had been hiding a life no one had imagined. Some guests murmured in shock, while others stared at James, waiting for an explanation he couldn't possibly give. James shifted uncomfortably, trying to keep control, but it was too late. His polished image, carefully constructed over decades, was breaking apart in front of everyone. The celebration had turned into something no one would forget, and for James, there was no going back. As the crowd buzzed with shock, a new message appeared on the live stream for everyone to see. It was from Vanessa herself. It's true, she typed. James and I have been married for 20 years. We even have children together. The message hit like a punch. Guests leaned forward to read, their disbelief turning into outright astonishment. Emma stood tall, her expression calm but filled with a quiet, steady fury. She raised her phone, holding it up so no one would miss a single word from Vanessa. James tried to regain control, whispering desperate pleas to Emma, urging her to stop. But she ignored him. Vanessa's messages continued, detailing the life James had shared with her, a life he'd hidden from everyone else in the room. The guests watched in stunned silence as the full extent of James's betrayal unfolded on screen, each new message from Vanessa tearing down what little remained of his carefully crafted image. The tension in the room was at a breaking point. Emma's father, visibly enraged, stood up and glared at James. You better start talking, he said, his voice low but firm. Friends and family members who had always admired James now looked at him with disgust and confusion, wondering how he could have deceived them all for so long. James, struggling to maintain his composure, stammered, It's not what it seems. There's an explanation. But his words fell flat, met with cold, suspicious eyes from every corner of the room. Emma's friends, her parents, her closest confidants, they all now felt the betrayal as personally as she did. A few close friends of James muttered in disbelief, grappling with the realization that their trusted friend had been leading a double life. The sense of betrayal spread like wildfire, filling the room with a deep, uncomfortable silence. It was clear to everyone. The man they thought they knew was a stranger, and any loyalty they'd once felt for him was gone. Just when it seemed the night couldn't become any more intense, Detective Sarah Lawson entered the scene. Calm and professional, she moved through the stunned crowd, flashing her badge to signal her authority. She approached Emma first, offering a steady, reassuring nod. "I understand there's a serious situation here," she said, her tone composed. Emma directed her to the live stream messages and quietly summarized what had just unfolded. Lawson's expression remained neutral, but her eyes showed a hint of understanding for the weight of what Emma and her family were going through. Turning to James, she asked him to step aside for questions, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. As she began her investigation, Lawson questioned Emma and others about what they knew, gathering initial details to piece together the reality of James's hidden life. She took note of Vanessa's messages on the live stream as well, understanding the depth of the deception. The guests, once just witnesses to a family celebration, now found themselves watching a real investigation unfold, realizing that the night was far from over. Emma sat down with Detective Lawson, her hands steady as she handed over all the evidence she'd been gathering over the past few weeks, emails, bank statements, and records of suspicious transactions. Lawson reviewed the documents carefully, nodding as she saw how meticulously Emma had pieced together the truth. Meanwhile, Emma's phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends and family, some expressing shock, others fishing for more details. Ignoring them all, Emma focused on helping Lawson, determined to make sure every lie James had told would be exposed. Detective Lawson asked pointed questions, helping Emma fill in gaps, uncovering even more inconsistencies in James's stories. The detective noted the clear pattern of deception James had woven, with funds shifting between two families and a long history of double lives. With every new discovery, Emma's resolve grew stronger, knowing justice was finally within reach. Across town, James sat in a cramped motel room, his mind racing as he grasped the full weight of his exposure. Messages from Emma and Vanessa went unanswered as he scrolled through calls and texts from people demanding explanations he didn't have. His once carefully guarded life was unraveling, and for the first time he had no way to control it. Desperation set in as he considered his options. Running seemed tempting, but he knew Detective Lawson was already piecing together everything. Facing mounting panic, he tried reaching out to a few close contacts, hoping someone might still be willing to help. But each attempt led to silence or cold rejection. Alone in the dim light of the motel, James realized he was out of moves. The charm that had held his two lives together had failed him, leaving him to confront a reality he had long ignored. There was no escaping the truth this time. Detective Lawson's next stop was Vanessa's home, a modest suburban house where she was staying with her two children. Vanessa greeted the detective with a tired but resolute look, her face lined with the exhaustion of the past few hours. She invited Lawson in, her voice barely above a whisper as she led her to the kitchen. As they sat, Lawson began asking questions, and Vanessa opened up about her life with James. She explained how he'd assured her he was divorced and had left his past behind. Each story he told had seemed so genuine, so believable. But now, in hindsight, she could see the cracks. Lawson noted every detail, from financial patterns to vague excuses James had given for long absences. Vanessa's bitterness was clear. She wanted justice, not just for herself but for her children, who were now left to grapple with their father's betrayal. By the end of the interview, Lawson had all she needed to paint a full picture of James's deception, now reinforced by both women he'd wronged. Emma met with her lawyer to discuss the next steps. She knew that uncovering the truth was just the beginning, and now it was about holding James accountable. Her lawyer laid out the options, explaining that James could face charges for bigamy, financial fraud, and possibly even embezzlement, given the way he'd shuffled money between his two lives. Emma listened carefully, nodding as her lawyer detailed each charge. She felt a newfound determination, realizing this was her chance to seek real justice. The lawyer explained that with Vanessa's cooperation, they'd have a stronger case, as her testimony could confirm James's double life and deceitful financial dealings. By the end of the meeting, Emma's mind was set. She was ready to press forward, not just for herself, but for everyone James had betrayed. This wasn't just about ending her marriage, it was about making sure he could never do this to anyone else again. Detective Lawson and Emma devised a plan to bring James in without incident. Knowing that James might reach out for a final plea, Lawson suggested they use it to their advantage. Emma agreed, determined to see this through. Soon enough, James messaged her, begging for a chance to talk in person, hoping he could convince her to back down. Emma replied calmly, agreeing to meet at a place they'd once considered special, the park where they used to discuss dreams of family and a future together. It was a location James knew well, and it offered the privacy he would assume he needed. But this time it was different. Lawson and a team of officers arrived early, setting up out of sight, ready for the moment James would arrive. Emma waited alone on the bench, the cool evening air and the quiet surroundings a stark contrast to the emotions running through her. She knew this was the final step, and once he arrived, there'd be no going back. James pulled into the park, headlights off as he scanned the area. He spotted Emma sitting on the bench, looking composed, almost serene. As he approached, his face was a mixture of desperation and hope, clinging to the possibility that he could somehow explain away everything he had done. Emma didn't stand up, she simply looked at him, her gaze steady and unyielding. "You had every chance to be honest, James," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "Now, it's too late." Before James could respond, Detective Lawson stepped out of the shadows, her badge catching the dim light. "James Turner, you're under arrest," she stated firmly. Two officers moved in, securing him in handcuffs as he stammered, trying to plead with Emma one last time. But Emma's expression didn't waver. As the officers led James away, his pleas faded into the night, leaving Emma standing by herself. She watched as the patrol car drove off, feeling a sense of finality settle over her. The lies were over, and with that, a new chapter in her life could finally begin. In the days that followed, the news of James's arrest spread quickly, and soon his case became a topic of public interest. Reporters flocked to cover the story of the man who had managed to live two lives, deceiving not only two families but a wide circle of friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. The courtroom was packed when the trial began, with Emma and Vanessa standing side by side as witnesses to his years of betrayal. Testimonies from both women detailed James's deceitful tactics, how he'd manipulated his finances, hidden his affairs, and constructed a web of lies. The evidence presented was overwhelming, and each new revelation chipped away at whatever defense James attempted to muster. The court found him guilty on all counts, sentencing him to several years in prison. As the verdict was announced, Emma and Vanessa exchanged a small, knowing nod. Their painful chapters with James had finally come to a close, leaving them with a shared sense of closure and the chance to rebuild their lives, free from the shadow of his lies. In the months after the trial, Emma and Vanessa began to forge an unlikely bond. What had once connected them through pain now became a source of support and resilience. They met regularly, finding comfort in their shared experiences and helping each other navigate the aftermath of James's betrayal. Emma sold the home she'd once shared with James, choosing to move to a new city where she could start fresh, away from reminders of the past. Vanessa focused on creating a stable life for her children, determined to give them a future free from the shadows of their father's mistakes. Over time, both women found a sense of peace they hadn't thought possible. What had begun as heartbreak transformed into strength, and they each discovered a renewed belief in themselves and in the life that lay ahead. Years passed, and the scars from James's deceit began to fade. Emma learned to trust again, not in another person right away, but in her own strength and judgment. The experience had changed her, but it had also made her more resilient, more self-assured. She had rebuilt her life on her own terms, finding joy in her independence and in new friendships that were based on honesty. Vanessa, too, grew into her own new chapter. She poured her energy into raising her children, teaching them values of honesty and respect that she hoped would guide them through life. Over time, she built a support network, surrounded by people who valued her for who she was, not as a shadow in someone else's story. Both women found that, in the end, they had emerged stronger. What had once been a life-shattering betrayal became a stepping stone to a future where they could each finally live freely, without secrets, and with a deep sense of peace.